Previously on the Invincible Iron Man.
For reasons that will continue to be unbeknownst to me, Marvel began positioning Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, as a major player in their universe. First, Tony went through an upgrade of sorts by exposing himself to a bioengineered computer virus called Extremis. This gave him the ability to interface directly with his Iron Man armor, among other perks. Added to that, it was later revealed that Tony had joined a cabal of other prominent people in the Marvel Universe called the Illuminati. The Illuminati was meant to exchange information and attempt to neutralize possible threats before they could get out of hand. However, the group would eventually overstep its bounds when they manipulated Bruce Banner into getting blasted into deep space. Finally, in the wake of Marvel's Civil War storyline, Tony Stark got appointed both Secretary of Defense and Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tony would leave control of Stark Industries to on-again, off-again love interest Pepper Potts and begin working with on-again, off-again love interest Maria Hill with several dozen government-registered superheroes.
Again, I wish I could just figure out why it is that in 2008 Marvel really wanted to push Iron Man. Okay, I promise that's the last time I do that joke.
However, a ghost from Tony's past arose in the form of Ezekiel Stane, whose father Obadiah was a rival of Stark's who once tried to stage a hostile takeover of his company. Stane began working on the operating system for Stark's new line of smartphones. This exposed people to a modified version of Extremis, turning them into human bombs. Unfortunately, one of those bombers went off at a party Tony and Pepper were attending. This left Pepper with shrapnel near her vital organs as well as her spinal cord. To save her, Tony had a modified version of his arc reactor placed in Pepper's chest. This new device tapped into Earth's magnetic field, which gave Pepper the ability to manipulate that field.
You may also recall that in my previous Invincible Iron Man review that Marvel's shipping schedule around this time got really wonky. In fact, there were so many delays that the storyline we're reviewing today actually takes place after the events of the next big crossover, which was called Secret Invasion. That storyline I reviewed in episode 5 of the Random Trade Review, so here's actually a quick recap of the events of Secret Invasion.
It was discovered that the Skrulls, a race of shape-shifting aliens, had been secretly infiltrating Earth's population and were replacing several heroes and villains along the way. Iron Man tried to lead the charge, but was betrayed by fellow Avengers member Spider-Woman, who was really the Skrull leader Veronica. Veronica convinced Stark that he too was actually a Skrull sleeper agent long enough to infect him with a virus that severed his connection to Extremis. Eventually, the heroes rallied back and Veronica was taken down, not by Tony Stark, but rather by Norman Osborn. This led the former Green Goblin to be appointed the new Secretary of Defense and head of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he then disbanded and replaced with a new agency called Hammer. He also formed his own group of Avengers by taking well-known villains and having them take up various hero mantles. Finally, Osborn took an old Iron Man armor and reformatted it, dubbing himself the Iron Patriot in the process.
Except there's one thing that Norman Osborn wants that Tony Stark has, and if it gets into Osborn's clutches, well, it'll be disastrous for everyone that Tony ever cared about. What is it? Well, it's a storyline that's so big it actually covers volumes 2 and 3 of Invincible Iron Man. This is World's Most Wanted.
Maria Hill packs up her personal belongings and leaves to the jeers of her former S.H.I.E.L.D. employees turned Hammer agents. Things aren't going well for Tony Stark either, as he tries to aid in the salvage of a helicarrier, but since he no longer has full control over his armor, the suit gives out and Tony ends up taking a drink. He checks up on Pepper, who's busy getting a recharge on her arc reactor unit, and then meets up with Osborn. Tony turns over all equipment needed for Norman to run S.H.I.E.L.D., nay Hammer, but Osborn wants one more thing, access to the Superhuman Registry database. Tony points out that Norman just can't access the registry at his leisure, and any time he tries to use it will require warrants and permission from the Department of Justice. It's all revealed to be a ruse, though, as Osborn attempts to look up the database as soon as Stark leaves, only to discover that it's not on any of the Hammer computers. Not only that, but Stark implemented a virus that has taken out Hammer's computer network.
The main thrust of the Civil War storyline involved the Superhero Registration Act, a newly passed law that required all individuals with superpowers, mainly heroes, but there were a few villains as well, to register with the government as federal agents. So in other words, if Norman Osborn gets to this database, he'll know pretty much every hero's secret identity. Also, in case you're wondering what exactly it is Hammer stands for, it was never officially given. In fact, it becomes a running joke that Osborn keeps trying to try out names for this acronym.
Tony meets up with Maria and Pepper at a random amusement center in New Jersey where he reveals what happened to the database. It turns out it was never in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s computers at all. It's only been in one place and now it needs to be deleted. Tony explains that Extremis allowed him to turn his brain into a makeshift hard drive, and that is where the superhuman database now resides. However, you just can't delete the file that easily. If there's any remnant left, the database could be reconstructed. Not to mention, Stark also placed files on his Iron Man repulsor tech and several other classified S.H.I.E.L.D. operations in his head. Any one of those things falling into Osborn's hands could turn out to be disastrous, so the only option is a near-complete mind wipe, save for basic functions like breathing and heartbeat. Neither Pepper or Maria are pleased about this, but to Tony there's no other choice. Still, Maria storms off as Tony tells Pepper that he's transferred control of Stark Industries to her. Her first job is to shut the company down, as all trust has been lost in the wake of the invasion. Not to mention, Hammer agents will soon be turning up to ransack the place in order to try to locate the superhuman registry database, and he doesn't want anyone to get hurt. Meanwhile, Maria Hill returns to her apartment to find a group of Hammer agents waiting for her. She puts up a good fight, but the numbers soon catch up with her. However, she's able to use this as a means to stage an escape while being transported. Finally, Osborn holds a press conference. He states that he turned up information that Tony Stark knew of the Skrull invasion before it occurred. Though this requires further investigation, Stark and Maria Hill must turn themselves in for questioning. If they don't, they will be declared enemies of the state. Maria gets back to Tony, who's undergoing the mind wipe process, and almost blasts her with a repulsor. The two watch the press conference while planning out what to do next. Tony needs Maria to go to Austin, Texas and pick up a special hard drive. Then she needs to take it to the only person who can be trusted with it, Captain America.
As most of you are probably aware, in the Civil War storyline of the comics, at the tail end, Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, was effectively assassinated. This resulted in the mantle of Captain America being passed on to none other than Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Yeah, that really did happen. Thankfully, everyone realized this was a really stupid idea, and eventually the mantle of Captain America would be taken up by none other than Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier. So he's actually the Captain America they're talking about right here.
Maria points out she doesn't exactly know how to contact Captain America, but Tony trusts her to find a way. Anyway, it's time to move on, as Hammer will soon turn up at the location. He apologizes for putting Maria what she's been through, and feeling there's no tomorrow, the two have sex. Meanwhile, Pepper Potts follows through with the shutdown of Stark Industries as Hammer begins raiding the facilities. The stress of all of this gets to her as she begins smashing up the office, which triggers a secret door opening in the process. Inside is a room containing a suit of Iron Man armor that appears to be built just for her.
Pepper's new armor eventually comes to be called the Rescue Armor, with her hero mantle just being Rescue, because this armor is specifically designed to aid in search and rescue missions, not combat.
Pepper puts on the armor and is greeted by Jarvis. Not Tony Stark's butler, mind you, but rather an operating system with Jarvis's voice. Jarvis explains that the armor is made to work with Pepper's arc reactor, and it's to be used in cases of search, rescue, and aid. Meanwhile, Tony Stark makes it to Los Angeles and visits his AA sponsor. He donates $2 million to help the organization because Hammer will soon be there, as Iron Man was spotted leaving the facility. As for Maria Hill, she makes it to Austin in the Stark building. However, the building is not abandoned. In fact, a villain named the Controller has taken up residence and begun brainwashing innocent people into being servants. Her presence is soon detected and the minions are sent after her.
Basil Sandhurst was a scientist who researched mind control. An incident with an alien caused his body to be bonded to an exoskeleton that allowed him to develop special mind control discs that allowed him to control individuals when he places the disc at the base of their skull.
It turns out that Tony's visit to his AA sponsor was done to bring out James Rhodes, aka War Machine. The two engage in a mid-air fight to cover for their conversation. Tony explains that he's working on something and not to trust Osborn, before having Rhodey blasts him into the sea below. Hammer has been monitoring the fight and knows it to be a ruse. Osborn calls in a favor from Atlantis and Namor. It's then that Osborn's chief secretary, Victoria Hand, comes in with a report about Pepper Potts trying out her new armor. She assisted several residents of Seattle during an earthquake and helped a malfunctioning plane land in Idaho.
Namor was actually part of the Illuminati alongside Tony Stark. He is later recruited to join a new cabal founded by Norman Osborn known as the Cabal. As for Victoria Hand, well, she was a longtime S.H.I.E.L.D. accountant who got into a relationship with a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and as the two got into a sort of drunken emailing thing, wound up bad-mouthing Nick Fury. This resulted in her being exiled to a S.H.I.E.L.D. base in Portland, Oregon.
Tony sets to work repairing his armor in an underwater base. It's getting more and more difficult as he's starting to lose those parts of his memory. It's then that Namor comes crashing through. Tony manages to hold off the Submariner long enough to initiate the self-destruct in the base. Back with Maria Hill, the Controller places one of his discs on the back of her neck and she struggles to fight long enough to cut the power supply to the mind control. Everyone snaps out of it and Hill gets the hard drive, though her mind is a little bit frazzled. Meanwhile, Hammer arrests Pepper and brings her in while Norman Osborn turns to some additional help in tracking down Tony Stark, Madame Mask and the Hood.
Madame Mask was raised under the name of Whitney Frost when she discovered that she was actually the daughter of a very powerful European crime boss. In an attempt to follow in the family business, she staged a break-in of Stark Industries that resulted in an explosion that caused her to become horribly disfigured. Even after her disfigurement, she still served as an on-again, off-again romance interest for Tony Stark, because what woman in the Marvel Universe hasn't at this point? Her current love is also a member of Norman Osborn's cabal, Parker Robbins, aka the Hood. He was a low-level criminal who came into possession of a demonically powered hood and pair of boots, and since then he's tried to start his own organized crime outfit consisting only of superpowered individuals.
Tony uses a mini-sub to get to the French coast. His memory is beginning to affect the way he can even use his Iron Man armor, so he has no other choice but begin downgrading to earlier versions of the armor. He stops by an electronic swap meet to try to pick up some pieces, but he winds up getting recognized. This attracts the attention of a knockoff Iron Man named Shockwave. He begins chasing Tony around and the two crash into an apartment. Tony plays possum just long enough to catch Shockwave in a feedback loop and neutralize his armor. Meanwhile, Pepper and her rescue armor are brought on board the Hammer helicarrier. She's not charged with anything, so they can question her at will. Pepper points out that since her armor is for search and rescue missions only, it doesn't qualify as needed to be taken over by Hammer. Unfortunately, it turns out the suit's battery is solar-powered and now she can't get it off. Osborn wants to know where Tony is, but Pepper doesn't know. However, Osborn has cooked up a plan as he prepares to dispatch Madame Mask. He releases Pepper and conveniently lets slip a little bit of information as to where Tony could possibly be headed. That should be able to lead them where they need to go, as long as Whitney Frost's old feelings don't get in the way.
Spoilers, Madame Mask's old feelings for Tony Stark get in the way.
Tony manages to downgrade his armor and makes it to Russia, where he's promptly shot down by anti-aircraft missiles. As it turns out, Tony has now forgotten how to check his radar. It's then that he bumps into the individual he's been looking for, the Crimson Dynamo.
The Crimson Dynamo is effectively the Russian Iron Man. It was first developed by a scientist named Anton Vuko, who first wore the armor but then eventually defected to the United States. Ever since then, the mantle of the Dynamo has passed down through several individuals. There have been up to, I believe, 11 at this point. The one we're talking about here is named Dmitri.
Pepper stops off to get her armor recharged before taking off to go find Tony. Back in Russia, Tony talks with Dmitri into loaning him the Dynamo armor so he can't be tracked so easily. From there, it's off to a subterranean Stark facility in Kirinsk, where the Tunguska event took place. Of course, he's not counting on the fact that Pepper is on the way, with Hammer and Madame Mask not too far behind. Meanwhile, Maria Hill makes it to New York City, still traumatized from her experience with the controller. She accosts a bus driver and is forced to escape the authorities once again. She then tracks down the one person who could possibly lead her to Captain America. When Ms. Heck, or that's what she calls herself, leaves her apartment, there's a message for the Black Widow on the door.
So why exactly would the Black Widow know where Bucky is? Well, it turns out the two actually had a long-term romance back in his Winter Soldier days. That romance has been recently resumed. Coincidentally, she's also served as an on-again, off-again love interest for Tony Stark. And Hawkeye. And Daredevil. And the Steve Rogers Captain America, if you count those direct-to-DVD Ultimates movies.
Pepper, having dubbed her armor Rescue along the way, makes it to Russia where Tony attacks her as he has no memory of the rescue armor. Pepper manages to get through to Tony as Madame Mask looks on. She has a shot but chooses to disable her communicator and make things personal.
See, I told you Madame Mask's feelings for Tony Stark would wind up getting in the way.
Back in New York City, Maria asks Widow about Captain America. Unfortunately, she's still dealing with the traumatic shock from the incident in Austin, and she's just babbling to the point that it puts Natasha off. That all changes when Hammer agents surround them. Widow has no choice but to get Maria to safety. Returning to Russia, Pepper wakes up in Tony's makeshift bed as he's working on reminder notes as his memories are continuing to vacate and he doesn't want a repeat of earlier. Later, he goes out to chop some firewood, which provides ample opportunity for Madame Mask to slip into the facility and take Pepper hostage. Mask reveals that she's read Tony's notes and knows what it is he's attempting to do. She then begins torturing Pepper by sending an electrical charge through her chest unit. Stark pleads with Madame Mask to let Pepper go and take him. Instead, Mask attempts to take advantage of Tony's mental status. Wondering if he could still lie to her, she removes her mask and asks if he's still attracted to her. This gives Pepper an ample amount of time to remote activate her armor, which catches Mask's attention, leading to Tony being taken hostage. Mask then shoots a fuel tank, causing an explosion in the process. Back in New York City, Maria Hill's trauma is still so bad to the point that she needs to be sedated. The Black Widow then takes matters into her own hands by dropping the hard drive off with a trusted informant. The informant then immediately sells Natasha out to Hammer, leading to her and Maria getting arrested, and the hard drive falling into Osborn's hands. Returning to Russia, Mask squares off with the rescue armor, sans Pepper. Pepper tells Tony to suit up and get out. She can handle Mask on her own. He doesn't want to leave, but she insists, pointing out that it's her time to save him. Madame Mask turns her focus to Pepper as the rescue armor's power reserves are soon tapped. Tony manages to get away and heads off to his old stomping grounds and where the Iron Man story first began, in Afghanistan.
Yeah, the backstory as to how Tony Stark became Iron Man has been told on a sliding timeline. Originally, Tony Stark was injured and taken hostage in China with sort of a connection to the Korean War. And then it became the Vietnam War. And then it became the Gulf War. And now, thanks to the movie, it's been the War on Terror. What's really weird is that his is really the only origin that this has been done for. I mean, Captain America is still tied to World War II. Characters who served in World War II, like Reed Richards and Ben Grimm, have also still had that as part of their backstory. So it's kind of weird.
Out of the smoldering wreckage of the Kieransk facility, Madame Mask emerges with the rescue armor. She finds her communicator and reports Pepper's death and that she has the suit. As Hammer agents begin arriving, they also turn up the Crimson Dynamo armor. While this plays out, Tony sends out a spelling error-filled message on a dummy SHIELD email server. He then suits up to head to Afghanistan. Back on the helicarrier, an agent named Sergeant Walsh finds Tony's message. He reports it to Victoria Hand and eventually Norman Osborn. Osborn is overjoyed, and Walsh might even make Sergeant for this. But Walsh is already feeling the sting of regret. Tony arrives in Afghanistan, where he's shot down because he was asleep at the control. He begins heading towards the cave where he built the first Iron Man armor. However, while he's still warming the armor up, he gets shot by two young locals. Using the armor to translate, he learns that they want their own armor. He snaps and scares them off after stealing their gun. He then puts the old armor on and prepares to leave for Dubai. Meanwhile, at Hammer headquarters, Madame Mask approaches both Natasha and Maria as they stew in their own cells. At the same time, work begins on the two suits of armor that Hammer has repossessed. It's then that they turn up a surprise in the form of the real Madame Mask inside the Crimson Dynamo armor. It turns out the one at the holding cell is Pepper Potts. She breaks the two spies out and they prepare to retrieve the hard drive. While all this is going down, Tony pops up on Hammer's radar. Walsh monitors the flight, but freezes. Osborn threatens to bust Walsh down to Sergeant so fast he won't even realize it, which is enough for Walsh to give Norman the wrong directions. However, Walsh's attempt to trick Osborn doesn't last very long as his supervisor catches him in the act, and soon Walsh is arrested, and Osborn is getting the right directions. The supervisor might even make Sergeant for this. Back with the three women, Pepper has a fully recharged rescue upload a virus that begins mucking up the former Stark computer network. The trio soon find themselves cornered by a group of SHIELD agents, and they decide to split up, with Pepper reuniting with the rescue armor, then taking off to go find Tony and Norman Osborn. Maria Hill and Natasha, meanwhile, make their way through the facility and soon find the hard drive. They manage to escape when Maria manages to talk several former SHIELD agents into joining their side. Osborn manages to catch up with Stark in Iran and begins pummeling him thanks to the technological differences between the two armors. Osborn then reveals that he knows what Tony's up to as Madame Mask, or should I say Pepper Potts, tipped him off to the memory erasure, but soon they'll be able to recover it. However, a wrinkle soon pops up as it turns out that the virus Pepper uploaded to the network is causing this confrontation to be streamed across all news services. Everyone is witnessing Norman Osborn beating up a guy who's practically in a vegetative state. Victoria Hand manages to talk Osborn down by pointing out that this is a PR nightmare and they just need to bring Tony in. Tony collapses as the memory erasure is now complete. Still, he's now in Hammer custody. Except Hammer can't actually do anything with Tony Stark's body, as it turns out he had a living will. Only his personal physician can take him off life support. But it's okay, as Dr. Donald Blake has been expecting their call for a long time.
And that concludes our look at the Invincible Iron Man, World's Most Wanted. How was it? Well, I think it's really darn good. I mean, this storyline is about 13 to 14 issues, but they go by really quickly. It's very well paced. It doesn't feel like a chore to read at all. I think Norman Osborn comes across as a very threatening villain. You believe that he could actually do a lot of these things that he's saying he's going to do, and you do fear what would happen if he suddenly got his hands on that database. In fact, I think it's really nice to see Norman Osborn interacting with another Marvel hero other than Spider-Man. I mean, yeah, the two are just kind of linked together, but still, it's kind of nice to see him bouncing off with Tony Stark. I mean, it makes sense given the fact that the two have a history in munitions manufacturing. So, yeah, it just works really well. And I think, again, I like the Pepper Potts rescue arc. I think that's really well done. Like I said, just a lot of stuff really works in this. If there's something that really doesn't work, unfortunately, it's Salvador Larroca's art. I normally like this artist, but he's way too photo reference heavy here. I mean, People nowadays complain that Tony Stark looks too much like Robert Downey Jr. Well, here, he looks like circa 1970s Burt Reynolds. Now, don't get me wrong, if you were to have made an Iron Man movie in the 1970s, Burt Reynolds would be spot-on casting for Tony Stark. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. But, yeah, it's just a little too obvious. I mean, not only that, but Norman Osborn looks like Paul Sorvino, which I don't think is spot-on casting. But, yeah, just, it's a little distracting at times. And while I don't necessarily hate the arc that Maria Hill goes on here with the whole getting captured and the trauma that falls out of that, I think it kind of grinds the story down just a little bit. It gets really repetitive because she's just constantly flipping out. And to be honest, I think it would have worked a lot better had she just explained that to Natasha right off the bat. But again, I'm not a huge fan of that whole trope still. So yeah, like I said, it does hold it back a little bit. But still, this is really enjoyable. I am going to give The Invincible Iron Man, World's Most Wanted, an A. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time in the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.